So I'll begin by saying good evening and thank you all for that really warm welcome. I am indeed Stacy Giroux, and to hear my job description read out loud like that, I realized just how highly technical it can sound and maybe even a little bit unapproachable. So I hope at least a few of you in the audience will appreciate my attempt at humor if I tell you I'm just a real-life version of the character Bernadette Wolowitz from The Big Bang Theory. There's one big exception though, and you have to tell my husband I said this. He's not quite as nerdy as her husband because mine only owns one Star Wars belt buckle, not the whole collection of them. But in all seriousness, the great thing about the Big Bang Theory is it's done for geeks like me what Steve Jobs and Bill Gates did for computer geeks and what George Lucas has done for sci-fi geeks. And that is make us not only culturally relevant, just a little bit cool. Yet, when I talk to people about my work on the development side of the pharmaceutical industry, inevitably one of two questions comes up. Why is it that it takes so long to bring new drug products to market? And why is it that they cost so much money? Well, the truth is the answers to those questions are really complex and outside of my personal scope as a scientist. But what I hope to do this evening is not only give you a nice 10,000-foot view of where we are, but also of the process that we use to bring drug products to market. And from there, hopefully you'll have a really good framework to maybe investigate some of those questions on your own. So when we talk about the process of bringing drug products to market, there's a quote that I love that sums it up quite beautifully. It comes from W. Edward Denning. He was a statistician, and he said, "In God we trust, all others bring data." And that's really it in a nutshell. It's all about the collection of data. And we do that data collection very systematically in 4 distinct steps or phases. We begin first at the preclinical phase. It's at this point that out of the millions of molecules that are available, you've identified at least one that you think will either speed up, slow down, start or stop some type of biological process. And as a result, you hope to change the quality of life for some patients. Once you've identified this molecule, you're going to spend the next 3 to 5 years working really hard to understand it analytically, which means controlling for its purity and its concentration. And you're also going to end up doing some animal studies to show not only that it's safe, but it behaves the way you expect it to inside of a living biological system. It's at this point that if your data is really compelling, you may actually get your first bit of press attention that says, hey, there's an exciting new treatment on the horizon. With this data in hand, you may now apply to go into phase 1 clinical studies. And this is a big milestone for your drug product because it's the first time it's going to be given to people. But because the purpose here is to think about safety first, these are typically healthy volunteers, and the studies are short in duration, no more usually than about 2 years. In addition to examining the different doses and their safety profile, you may actually also look at different routes of administration. So that means, do you give this medication as a pill, or maybe an injection, or maybe even an intravenous solution? With this data in hand, you may now apply to go into your phase 2 clinical studies. Here, not only are you going to build on the safety data that you've gained up till now, but you're also going to look to see if there's a real benefit from receiving your drug product. And part of measuring if there's an actual benefit will mean showing that any changes that you're seeing for your patients can actually be attributed to not just simply that placebo effect. And if you're not familiar with it, the placebo effect is a phenomenon whereby just the idea that you're receiving a treatment can actually produce a physiological improvement in your condition. So the way we handle this from a trial design perspective is to enroll patients in what we call a double-blinded study. That means neither the patient nor the researcher knows who's receiving drug product or the placebo, which has no active ingredients. It then becomes the job of the mathematicians at the end of the study to review the data and provide statistical evidence of there having been a benefit of taking your drug product. And you may also end up having to run multiple phase 2 studies. So for example, in the cancer treatments I've worked in, they've targeted cancers of the secreting cells, and we have lots of secreting cells in our body. Just put up a few examples here, your breasts, your colons, your lung. So it would be necessary for you to actually run a study in each of these indications to see if there's a benefit. If at the end of another 5 to 7 years of running those phase 2 studies, you have been one of the lucky research teams that can show a benefit from your drug product, you've now reached the final definitive step of the process, the phase 3 clinical trial. And this is a big moment because these trials are so critical. They're going to show everything that you've learned up till now about the safety and the benefit of your drug product holds true, but on a much larger scale. These trials are enormous. They typically enroll thousands of patients, and they can take 5 to 7 years to conduct just by themselves. If at the end of these studies you meet all of your predetermined endpoints, you now have a mountain of data that you can compile and put together a submission to take your drug product to market. The Pharmaceutical Researchers and Manufacturers of America in 2014 estimated $51.2 billion was spent in drug product development. This supports some of the 7,000 drug products that are currently somewhere in this process we talked about worldwide. But for every 10 of them that enters phase 1, only one of them will ever make it to an approved drug product. So I hope this evening I've given you a sense of what organizational commitment it takes to bring a drug product through to market. I'd like to end on a personal note. For those of us who work in this industry, our devotion is not just to the job, it's to the cure. They all matter, and we just hope to find it one day.